The car door opens. He steps out, men flanking him, scanning the street. A powerful man, an army of guards, tearing apart the poorest streets of Seoul, showing her photo to every stranger who'd look. But why would a Korean billionaire abandon his empire to hunt for one woman the world had already forgotten? To understand what he was so desperate to find, we have to go back. Before we continue her story, if you believe a woman's worth is never decided by the people who underestimate her, tap that like button and subscribe. Every like helps her story reach someone who needs to hear it today. Now, Itaewon at night is a different city than the one the tourists photograph. It is the city of people who arrived somewhere far from home and had to make their lives make sense anyway. The city of immigrants and dreamers and survivors, of small rooms and shared kitchens, and the particular kind of resilience that only shows up when there's no other option left. That's where Zara landed. She found a small room she could barely afford, and a community of women who were all in their own ways surviving. There was a Nigerian woman down the hall who made pepper soup every Sunday, and left her door open so the smell could travel through the building like a blessing. There was a Kenyan woman who braided hair in the common room and charged half what the salons did. They didn't ask Zara a lot of questions. They recognized the particular posture of a woman who'd been through something terrible and wasn't ready to name it yet. They simply made room for her at the table, and that was its own kind of grace. The first night in that small cold room, Zara sat on the edge of a narrow bed with her suitcase still packed beside her, and she let herself fall apart. She had held it together through the accusation. She had held it together walking out of that estate with her head high. She had held it together on the long journey across the city to a neighborhood she'd never seen, carrying everything she owned, but alone, in the dark, with no one watching and no dignity left to protect. She cried for the nursing career she'd left behind in Atlanta. She cried for her mother, so far away and so sick, depending on a daughter who had just lost everything. She cried for the cruelty of it. And yes, she cried for him, for Junho, for the man who had sat beside her under the city sky and called her extraordinary, and who had then looked at her in front of the whole household and said, "I'm disappointed." She had let herself trust him. She had let herself feel something, and that, somehow, hurt worst of all. She let herself grieve all of it, every piece. And then, when the crying was done, she wiped her face, and she unpacked her suitcase, and she got up. Because that's what Gloria Coleman's daughter did. You feel it all the way through, and then you get up. You keep going until keeping going turns back into living. Her mother had taught her that, in 1,000 small ways, across a whole childhood of watching a single woman carry a weight that should have taken two. The only thing nobody can ever take from you is what you put in your mind. So put good things in there. Zara put good things in there. She put her mother's laugh in there. She put her grandmother's gospel songs in there. She put the memory of Mr. Patterson sneaking sugar into his coffee in there. And she built her strength back out of those small, warm pieces, one at a time, until she could stand up straight again. She called her mother every night, just as she always had, and she never let her hear a single crack in her voice. "How is Seoul treating you, baby?" Gloria would ask. "It's teaching me things, Mama," Zara would answer. "I'll tell you which things once I figure out what to do with them." And her mother would laugh, even thin and tired from the treatment. That laugh was the same laugh it had always been, and Zara would close her eyes and hold on to the sound like a rope thrown across the dark. She started small, alterations, mending, custom pieces sewn by hand in the corner of her tiny room. Her hands had always known how to make things. She'd learned from her grandmother first, then from videos watched at 2 in the morning. then from pure, stubborn practice. Word spread through the neighborhood, a dress taken in here, a pair of trousers hemmed there, a torn jacket made new. The women sent their friends, and their friends sent more friends, and slowly, stitch by stitch, Zara began to build something out of nothing at all. There was one evening, a few weeks in, that she would remember for a long time. A young Korean woman had come to her in tears. She had a job interview the next morning, the most important interview of her life, and the one good outfit she owned had been ruined. A long tear straight down the side. The shops were closed. She had no money for something new. She had heard, from a friend of a friend, that there was a woman in the neighborhood who could fix anything. Zara sat her down, made her a cup of tea, and worked on that outfit until well past midnight. She didn't just mend the tear, she remade the whole piece, took it in where it needed taking in, added a small touch at the collar that turned a plain garment into something that looked like it belonged in a window display. When she was done, the young woman put it on and looked at herself and started to cry all over again, but for a different reason this time. "How much do I owe you?" she asked. Zara looked at her, this frightened young woman, chasing a future, carrying a weight Zara understood better than almost anyone. "Pay me when you get the job," she said. The young woman got the job. She came back a week later, not just to pay, but to bring 3 of her friends. And that was how it went, in that small corner of Itaewon. Kindness moving outward, person to person, until the woman who had been cast out of one of the richest houses in Seoul was quietly becoming someone the whole neighborhood relied on. It wasn't the life she'd planned, it wasn't nursing, but it was honest, and it was hers, and it kept the money flowing home to Atlanta where it mattered most. And in the building of it, something began to heal in her that the betrayal had broken. She remembered who she was. Not the maid, not the accused, not the woman someone had tried to throw away. Just Zara Coleman, who could walk into any room with nothing and walk out having built something, who had crossed an ocean on faith and was still, against every odd, standing. What she didn't know, couldn't have known, was that across the city, in a house full of expensive silence, a man was not sleeping. He was lying awake, staring at a ceiling, replaying a conversation over and over again in his mind. Not the accusation, not the terrible scene, the garden, the book, the girl who'd looked at him and asked if he was hurt, like wearing a suit that fits perfectly, but you can't breathe in it. What she didn't know was that the truth wasn't finished yet. The truth has a way of refusing to stay buried. By all appearances, the story should have ended there. The engagement moved forward, a dinner was held, a ring was placed on Hyuna's finger. Photographs were taken that would live forever on the internet, making everything look settled and certain and done. Madame Kwan beamed with satisfaction. Hyuna smiled the smile of a woman who has won something and is making very sure the right people notice. Junho sat through it all and felt the suit growing tighter around his chest with every passing day. He had done the expected thing. He had moved forward. He had let her go. He should have felt settled. He didn't. He felt like a man who had lost something he couldn't name and couldn't stop reaching for. He found himself walking past her old room in the back of the house, pausing at the door for no reason he could explain. He found himself standing in the kitchen at night, looking at the counter where she used to make tea, half expecting to find her there. He found himself in the library, pulling down the books they'd talked about, reading the passages she'd loved and hearing her voice in his head as he read them. The whole house had gone quiet in a way it hadn't been before. Not the comfortable silence of wealth, but the hollow silence of an absence. He told himself she'd done a terrible thing. He told himself he'd been right to let her go. He told himself over and over the story that everyone had handed him. But it wouldn't hold. The story kept coming apart in his hands. Because it didn't match the woman he had known. It didn't match the girl who'd asked if he was hurt before she knew his name. It didn't match the way she'd talked about her mother, the fierce and tender devotion of it. It didn't match the dignity with which she'd walked out of that house, refusing to beg, refusing to break. The story everyone told him was about a different woman entirely, a woman he had never actually met. And the more he sat with that, the more a small, cold question began to grow in the back of his mind. A question he didn't want to ask because he was afraid of where it led. What if she had been telling the truth? He pushed it down. He buried it under the wedding plans and the business deals and the relentless machinery of the life that had been built for him. But it wouldn't stay buried. And then came the night that changed everything. Again. His phone rang. It was Sung Min. If you've made it this far with her, then you already know Zara is not the kind of woman who breaks. She was thrown out, lied about, and left with nothing, and still, she rose. And if her strength has touched you even a little, do something kind for yourself right now. Take a slow breath, and remember, your setbacks are not your ending either. If you're enjoying this story, tap that like button. It truly helps this channel grow. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because what happens next changes everything. Because far across the city, a man who had stayed silent for far too long was finally about to pick up the phone. And the truth he carried was about to bring an entire empire to its knees. The man who had been the head of security at the Kwan estate for 15 years. The man who had seen everything, who had said nothing, who had stood at his post through every secret that house had ever held. The man who could no longer outdrink his own conscience. "Sir," Sung Min said, and his voice was rough with guilt and alcohol, "I need to tell you something about the night with Miss Zara." Junho went very still. "Tell me." And Sung Min told him everything. He told him who had been in that kitchen. He told him what had been slipped into that glass of water. He told him who had instructed him exactly where to stand and precisely when to bring the others to that room. He told him how the entire scene had been built like a stage set, arranged piece by piece, so that Junho would walk in and see exactly what he was meant to see and believe exactly what he was meant to believe. He told him that Zara had been innocent, completely, entirely innocent, that nothing had happened at all, that there had been no one with her in that room, that the whole thing had been a fiction designed to make a good man throw away the best thing that had ever happened to him. When Sung Min finished, the line stayed silent for so long that he thought the call had dropped. "Sir?" he said. "Are you still there?" "Who told you to do this?" Junho's voice was barely above a whisper. "Who arranged it?" Pop. A long pause. "You already know, sir," Sung Min said quietly. "You just don't want to." And Junho closed his eyes, because in that moment he did know. He had probably always known, somewhere underneath everything. He just hadn't been able to bear the shape of it. "You're coming with me," he said. "Where, sir?" "First, I'm going to talk to my mother, and then you're going to help me find her, and you're going to tell her, to her face, everything you just told me." He went to his mother first. Not to punish her, not yet. He needed something more important than punishment. He needed to hear her say it. He needed the truth to come out of her own mouth, in her own voice, so that he could never again pretend he hadn't heard it. The conversation was not loud. That was the most devastating thing about it. There was no shouting, no shattered glass, no slammed doors. There was only a son sitting across from his mother in the cold elegance of the family home, asking her to look at him, and a woman slowly realizing that all the walls she had spent her life building had been made of the wrong material. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to answer me honestly." "Of course," she said. "What is it?" "The night with Zara. Did you tell me the whole truth about what happened?" She tried to wave it away. "Why are you bringing this up again? I already told you everything." "No," he said, and his voice was quiet and certain. "I'm asking if you told me the whole truth." Something in his tone stopped her. She tried to reroute, the way clever people do when they feel the ground shifting. She reminded him of what was at stake: the contract, the two families, the future they had all worked toward for so long, everything she had sacrificed to protect. "That's not what I asked," he said. She looked down at her own hands, and for the first time in his entire life, Jun-ho watched his mother run out of words. "Did you do it?" he asked again. "Was it you?" The silence stretched long and terrible between them. "Yes," she said at last, so quietly he almost couldn't hear it. "Yes, I did it." For us, for this family. We couldn't afford to lose the contract, Jun-ho. I was protecting our future. I was protecting you. "You were protecting me," he repeated, slowly, turning the words over like he was holding each one up to the light to see what it was really made of. "From what? From someone who made me feel like a human being for the first time in years?" She was a maid. "She was the only person in my entire life who ever saw me," he said. "Not the name, not the money, not the heir to the Kwan fortune, me. And you took her from me. You drugged an innocent woman, and you destroyed her in front of the whole house, and you let me believe it. You let me say I'm disappointed to her face." His voice cracked, just once. "You let me be the man who didn't believe her." His mother had no answer. "You never really knew me," he said finally. "Not in anger. In something far worse than anger. In certainty. All these years. And you never once knew who I actually am." Ah. He stood up. "I'm calling off the engagement," he said, "and I'm leaving this house." Jun-ho, his mother rose, reaching for him, the careful composure finally cracking. "Jun-ho, please." But he was already walking away, and this time, nothing she could say would call him back. He looked for her for 2 weeks. Wrong addresses, dead ends, neighbors who shrugged and shut their doors, threads that went cold the moment he pulled on them. But he did not stop. He had let her go once on the strength of a lie, and he would walk every street in Seoul before he let the lie stand. Sung-min searched with him, driven by his own need to set right what he had helped set wrong, and slowly, piece by piece, they followed the trail to Itaewon. It was a woman in Zara's building who finally stopped him. She looked him up and down with eyes that had seen plenty, and she said the thing he could not argue with. "You're the one who didn't believe her." He didn't flinch. "Yes." "And you think she wants to see you?" "I think she deserves to hear the truth," he said. "Whatever she decides to do after that is entirely her right. I'm not here to ask her for anything. I'm here because the truth was taken from her, and she deserves to have it back." The woman studied him for a long moment. Whatever she saw in his face must have been real enough. She lifted one hand and pointed down the street. There's a market at the end of the road, she said. She's there now, buying fabric. She paused. Be gentle with her. She's been through more than you know. I know, Junho said. That's why I'm here. He found her at a fabric stall in the open-air market, surrounded by bolts of cloth in every color, her hands moving thoughtfully over the textures the way an artist considers her materials. She saw him before he reached her. She didn't run, she didn't close herself off or turn away. She simply stood there with that same stillness she had always carried, the stillness of a woman who knew exactly who she was, no matter what anyone had tried to make her. He stopped a few feet away. Zara. How did you find me? I didn't stop looking. That's not an answer. No, he admitted. It's not. He took a breath. Can I have a few minutes? Please. That's all I'm asking for. She looked down at the fabric in her hands, then back at him. You have until I finish here, she said. So he talked, standing there in the middle of the busy market, with the sounds of the city all around them. He told her everything. He told her about Sungmin's phone call. He told her what had been in the water. He told her about the scene that had been built around her, arranged piece by careful piece, so that he would believe the worst. He told her about confronting his mother, and about every word his mother had finally confessed. He did not ask for her forgiveness. He simply gave her, at last, the truth that had been stolen from her, laid it down in front of her like something he was returning to its rightful owner. When he finished, she was quiet for a long, long moment. Her hands had gone still on the fabric. Then she said, "You didn't believe me." No. I need you to say it again. I didn't believe you, he said, and his voice did not waver, because she deserved to hear it clearly. I should have. You looked me in the eye and you told me the truth, and I chose the lie, because it was easier to believe. I am more sorry than I have words for, Zara. She turned and looked at him then, really looked at him, the way she had on that very first morning when she'd asked a stranger if he was hurt, like she was reading something underneath the surface of him. And then she told him the thing that changed everything all over again. I'm pregnant. The whole market seemed to go quiet around them. Is it? He started. She gave him a look that stopped the sentence before it could fully form. I'm sorry, he said immediately. I know it's mine. I know. He took a slow breath, steadying himself against the enormity of it. What do you need from me? He asked. Whatever it is, tell me, and it's yours. I don't know yet, she said honestly. Then I'll wait, he said, until you do, however long that takes. A few days later, there was a knock at Zara's door. She opened it and found Madame Kwan standing there. But not the Madame Kwan she knew. There was no driver waiting at the curb, no assistant trailing behind, no expensive jewelry, no perfect armor of wealth and certainty, just a woman, older than Zara had ever let herself see her, smaller, somehow, without the great house around her. A woman who had finally run out of ways to avoid the things she had done. Zara looked at her and said nothing. She simply waited. I know you have no reason to let me in, Madame Kwan said. Then why are you here? Because my son will not come home until I face what I did, She drew a slow breath, and it seemed to cost her something. And because you were right. That night, in front of everyone, you looked at me and you told me the truth, and I would not look back at you. I never looked at you. In all the time you were in my house, I looked through you. I saw a problem, an obstacle to be removed. I never once saw a person. She lifted her eyes and met Zara's gaze, fully, for the first time. I am looking now, she said, and I am ashamed of what I see I did to you. You came to my country to save your mother's life. You worked in my home with more dignity than I have shown in years, and I tried to destroy you for it. There is no excuse. I'm not here to offer one. I'm only here to say that I know, and that I'm sorry. Zara didn't soften all at once. That isn't how real forgiveness works. It doesn't arrive like a flipped switch. It comes slowly, the way a door opens that has been closed for a very long time. But she stepped back, and she held the door open. Come in, she said. I'll make tea. And that too was its own kind of grace, and the grace of a woman who had every right to slam the door, and chose instead to leave it open. Soul at night is something else entirely. Lights that stretch out toward the horizon and never seem to end. The Han River winding dark and patient through the middle of it all. The whole city humming with the endless, restless business of being alive. They stood together on a rooftop, not the Quan estate, somewhere simpler, somewhere that belonged to neither of their worlds and somehow to both of them at once. Below them, the city glowed. Around them, the night was cool and clean and full of possibility. Zara's mother was getting better. The treatment had worked. Cautiously optimistic had finally become simply optimistic, and then something even better than that. Gloria Coleman was going to live, and on the phone, when Zara had told her everything, her mother had laughed and cried and said, "Baby, I always knew you'd find your way. I just didn't know your way would take you so far." Now Jun-ho stood beside her on the rooftop, and he reached into his jacket, and he brought out a ring. It was simple, warm gold, set with a single dark stone that caught the city light and held it. They had come a long way to reach this rooftop, not just the distance of 2 weeks of searching, or the breadth of the ocean between Atlanta and Seoul. They had come the long way that two people travel when they have to unlearn everything they were taught about who deserves what, and who belongs where, and which kind of love the world will allow. He had walked away from a fortune and a family and the only life he'd ever known. She had survived a betrayal that would have hardened most hearts forever, and somehow kept hers open. They had both lost things to get here, and they had both found something worth more than anything they'd lost. "It's a black star sapphire," he said. "The jeweler told me they come mostly from East Africa. I thought that was right. I thought it should be something that came from where your story comes from, not just where mine does." She looked at the ring. "Jun-ho." "I'm not asking because of the baby," he said. "I need you to know that. I'm asking because I have been more myself since I met you than I have been in my entire life. I was a man going through the motions of a life that someone else designed for me. I was asleep, and then you walked into my house with your nursing textbooks, and your tea made the way your grandmother taught you, and your refusal to shrink yourself for anybody, and I woke up. You woke me up." She was quiet, listening, her eyes on his face. "I let you go once," he went on, "because I believed a lie instead of believing you. I will spend the rest of my life making sure I never make that mistake again. I don't want to go back to who I was before you. I don't think I even know how. You know this isn't going to be easy, she said finally. Your world and my world, your family, my family an ocean away, a child between two countries. I know. My mother is in Atlanta. My whole life is somewhere you've never been. Then we'll build a world that holds both, he said. Yours and mine, Atlanta and Seoul. We'll build something that fits us, instead of trying to fit ourselves into something that was never made for us in the first place. She looked at the ring. Then she looked at him, the man she had once asked, "Are you hurt?" before she knew anything about him, the man who had failed her, and searched 2 weeks of cold streets to find her, and given her back the truth that had been stolen, and waited, exactly as he'd promised, until she was ready. "Ask me properly," she said. He laughed, that real, surprised laugh that she had been the very first person in the world to find in him, and then his face grew serious and tender and sure. "Zara Coleman," he said, "will you let me spend the rest of my life becoming someone worthy of you?" Below them, the great city kept on going, humming in Korean and English and every language people reach for when they're trying to say the thing that words can barely hold. She took the ring from his hand, and she slid it onto her own finger. "Don't make me regret it," she said softly. "I won't," he said. "I promise you, I won't." Some people cross oceans chasing dreams. Zara Coleman crossed one running from a nightmare. She left America with a nursing degree and Korea handed her a mop. She was lied about, cast out, and broken by a man she'd let herself trust. She lost almost everything she came with. But she never lost herself, not for a single day. And in the end, the truth she had told all along refused to stay buried. Her mother lived. Her name was cleared. The man who failed her became the man who fought for her, and the small, stubborn courage that had carried her across an entire ocean carried her, at last, all the way home, to a home she built herself, on her own terms, out of nothing but faith and work and an open heart. Her grandmother used to say, there are 3 kinds of doors in this life. The ones that open inward, the ones that open outward, and the wisest ones of all, the ones you have to build yourself. Zara Coleman built hers. And she walked through it standing tall. Some people come into your life like answers. Zara came into his like a question. The best one he ever heard. If this story touched your heart, please hit the subscribe button, turn on the bell notifications, and give a like to this video. I will be sharing more stories on this channel. One question: do you want the part 3 of this story? Give the answer in the comment below.